Okay, everybody, welcome at today's Spark. Today we've got Delicia Baben talking about the living will.
Okay, I'm going to talk about living wills today, a very hot topic for a lot of people, because some people have heard of it, some people know all about it, some people wish they knew more about it. So I'm going to address the basics about the concept and then just discuss a few of the myths, because there's a lot of myths around it, as most things in the medical field. So a living will is a legal document. It sets out your wishes for healthcare when you cannot speak for yourself. But please take note, it's ethically acceptable for the doctors to use the living will, but you cannot force them by law. It's not a law that's written in as enforceable. So it is currently not possible to go to court to get a doctor to enforce your advance directive or your living will. There is, however, guidelines by both the South African Medical Association and the Health Professions Council that have recently issued guidance stating that all patients do have the right to refuse treatment. So a living will is not based on so much as what you do not want, as it is that you have to give consent for treatment that you receive. So if you don't give consent, they cannot actually force you to do it. So basically, it is a refusal of medical treatment, even if such refusal will result in death. Okay, I'll read you the exact words that they use for most of the templates in a minute. So to be able to make such a declaration, you have to be over a certain age for medical consent. Who of you know what the current age in South Africa is now for giving medical consent? At what age are you allowed to give medical consent?
18.
Nope.
21.
12, guys. A
12.
child of 12 can give consent for medical treatment for themselves or their children. It's written like that into our medical law. Can you imagine? So at the age of 12, a child can sign consent. So at the age of 12, a child can have a living will also. But now listen to the words of the living will. It's important to understand exactly what it says. So it says, if the time comes when I can no longer take part in decisions for my own future, let this declaration stand as my directive. If there is no reasonable prospect of my recovery from physical illness or impairment, or is expected to cause me severe distress, or render me incapable of a rational existence, I do not give my consent to be kept alive by means of a secondary support system, including by way of a pacemaker. I also do not give my consent to any form of tube feeding when I'm dying, and I request that I receive whatever quantity of drugs and IV fluids as may be required to keep me free from pain or distress, even if the moment of death is hastened. It's a big concept. It's important to understand, though, that when you draw up your living will, you can change the words. So if you feel that you're comfortable with being tube fed at the end, you don't want to be hungry, you remove that sentence. It's not cast in stone. So in cases where emergency treatment is necessary and there is no evidence of a living will, the doctor has to provide the necessary treatment. You cannot be angry at your doctor for doing what he did if he was not aware of the living will. So it's very important that you know that someone has your living will that can give the doctor access to that. We talk about this in Joyful Ending. Who keeps your living will? people have told me that it's kept at the same place as their last will and testament by their financial advisor. I can assure you, as the nursing sister working with you, I'm not phoning your financial advisor to find out if you have a living will. So it will not come into practice if it's there. Doctors who are not prepared to honor an advance directive, and remember, go back to what we said earlier, it's not enforceable by law. They can stand back and arrange for another doctor to take over your care. You can also ask for that. If you have a conversation with your doctor, he's not comfortable with applying the living will, it's your right to ask for another doctor. So now there's a few myths that we need to talk about. The first one is, it's not important I have a will. You have a will, yes. But your last will and testament will only talk when you are not around anymore. It's an after-death document. Whereas the living will talk while you're still alive. And it's only about your medical treatment. Okay. So it addresses your right to decide whether you want to be kept alive artificially or not. And it only comes into practice when you cannot say it yourself. If you can still say it yourself, you say it. It's for the times when you cannot. Myth 2, it's about euthanasia or assisted living. No, it's definitely not. Your living will does not instruct your doctor to intervene actively. In fact, it does the opposite. It tells the doctor not to act. So you're not giving consent to certain actions. It's not giving instructions for actions. Okay, you understand the difference. And each of us have to be at peace with this whole concept before we can decide to draw up our living will. Myth number 3, it's selfish. It is most definitely not selfish. I can tell you of many, many cases where families stood next to a bed and they felt very distressed and very responsible for taking decisions that's life and death decisions. And it's at the worst possible time. So the living will should be there to make it easier, not to make it more difficult. Okay, if they know that your wishes was not to be on a ventilator, it's an easy decision to make, and they cannot blame themselves later because it was your decision. Myth 4, it won't be honored, so it's pointless. It's becoming more and more acceptable for doctors to apply living wills. Okay, this may have been true 10 years ago. It is not enforceable by law. That much is true, but it's very accepted by medical practitioners. In most institutions nowadays, it's a non-event if a family comes to you and says, please remember my mom has a living will. It just takes a lot of stress away in the team and in the family. Myth 5, I can wait until tomorrow. It cannot wait until tomorrow. You all know that life is just, it can change in a heartbeat. Everything can change in a heartbeat. Please don't wait for tomorrow. Make sure you have the document, but more importantly, make sure you have the discussions. Then the last myth we're going to look at, I'm too young to need one. Guys, we've just said, you can have anything happen to you at any age, and you can give consent at the age of 12. Who of you knows 12-year-olds? They can decide for themselves. It's exceptionally young. So please make it a mission to make sure that you understand what your wishes are and that it's communicated in some way. And if you attend Joyful Living, we'll tell you more about it.